Progress Report 16, Part 1. July 14th. It was a bad day to go out to Warren. Gray and drizzling, and that may account for the depression that grips me when I think about it. Or perhaps I'm kidding myself and it was the idea of possibly being sent there that bothered me. I borrowed Bert's car. Alice wanted to come along, but I had to see it alone. I didn't tell Faye I was going. It was an hour and a half drive out to the farmland community of Warren, Long Island, and I had no trouble finding the place. A sprawling gray estate revealed to the world only by an entrance of two concrete pillars flanking a narrow side road and a well-polished brass plate with the name Warren State Home and Training School. The roadside sign said 15 NSRX, so I drove slowly past the blocks of buildings looking for the administrative offices. A tractor came across the meadow, and in addition to the man at the wheel, there were two others hanging on the rear. I stuck out my head and called, "Can you tell me where Mr. Winslow's office is?" The driver stopped the tractor and pointed to the left and ahead. "Main hospital. Turn left and bear to your right." I couldn't help noticing the staring young man riding at the rear of the tractor, hanging onto the handrail. He was unshaven, and there was the trace of an empty smile. He had on a sailor's hat with the brim pulled down childishly to shield his eyes, although there was no sun out. I caught his glance for a moment, his eyes wide, inquiring, but I had to look away. When the tractor started forward again, I could see in the rear view mirror that he was looking after me, curiously. It upset me, because he reminded me of Charlie. I was startled to find the head psychologist so young, a tall, lean man with a tired look on his face, but his steady blue eyes suggested a strength beyond the youthful expression. He drove me around the grounds in his own car and pointed out the recreation hall, hospital, school, administrative offices, and the two-story brick buildings he called cottages where the patients lived. "I didn't notice a fence around Warren," I said. "No, only a gate at the entrance and hedges to keep out curiosity seekers." "But how do you keep them from wandering off, from leaving the grounds?" He shrugged and smiled. "We can't, really. Some of them do wander off, but most of them return." "Don't you go after them?" He looked at me as if trying to guess what was behind my question. "No. If they get into trouble, we soon know about it from the people in town, or the police bring them back." "And if not?" "If we don't hear about them or from them, we assume they've made some satisfactory adjustment on the outside. You've got to understand, Mr. Gordon, this isn't a prison. We are required by the state to make all reasonable efforts to get our patients back, but we're not equipped to closely supervise 4,000 people at all times. The ones who manage to leave are all high moron types. Not that we're getting many of those anymore. Now we get more of the brain damage cases who require constant custodial care, but the high morons can move around more freely, and after a week or so on the outside, most of them come back when they find there's nothing for them out there. The world doesn't want them, and they soon know it." We got out of the car and walked over to one of the cottages. Inside, the walls were white tile, and the building had a disinfectant smell to it. The first floor lobby opened up to a recreation room filled with some 75 boys sitting around waiting for the lunch bell to be sounded. What caught my eye immediately was one of the younger boys on a chair in the corner, cradling one of the other boys, 14 or 15 years old, cuddling him in his arms. They all turned to look as we entered, and some of the bolder ones came over and stared at me. "Don't mind them," he said, seeing my expression. "They won't hurt you." The woman in charge of the floor, a large-boned, handsome woman with rolled-up shirt sleeves and a denim apron over her starched white skirt, came up to us. At her belt was a ring of keys that jangled as she moved, and only when she turned did I see that the left side of her face was covered by a large, wine-colored birthmark. "Didn't expect any company today, Ray," she said. "You usually bring your visitors on Thursdays." "This is Mr. Gordon, Thelma, from Beekman University. He just wants to look around and get an idea of the work we're doing here. I knew it wouldn't make any difference with you, Thelma. Any day is all right with you." "Yeah," she laughed strongly, "but Wednesday we turn the mattresses. It smells a lot better here on Thursday." I noticed that she kept to my left so that the blotch on her face was hidden. She took me through the dormitory, the laundry, the supply rooms, and the dining hall, now set and waiting for the food to be delivered from the central commissary. She smiled as she talked, and her expression and the hair piled in a bun high on her head made her look like a Lautrec dancer, but she never looked straight at me. I wondered what it would be like living here with her to watch over me. They're pretty good here in this building, she said. But you know what it is. 300 boys, 75 on a floor, and only 5 of us to look after them. It's not easy to keep them under control, but it's a lot better than the untidy cottages. The staff there doesn't last very long. With babies, you don't mind so much. But when you get to be adults and still can't care for themselves, it can be a nasty mess. You seem to be a very nice person, I said. The boys are fortunate to have you as their house supervisor. She laughed heartily, still looking straight ahead, and showed her white teeth. No better or worse than the rest. I'm very fond of my boys. It's not easy work, but it's rewarding when you think how much they need you. The smile left her for a moment. Normal kids grow up too soon, stop needing you, go off on their own, forget who loved them and took care of them. But these children need you, need all you can give, all of their lives. She laughed again, embarrassed at her seriousness. It's hard work here, but worth it. Back downstairs, where Winslow was waiting for us, the dinner bell sounded, and the boys filed into the dining room. I noticed that the big boy who had held the smaller one in his lap was now leading him to the table by the hand. Quite a thing, I said, nodding in that direction. Winslow nodded too. Jerry's the big one, and that's Dusty. We see that sort of thing here often. When there's no one else who has time for them, sometimes they know enough to seek human contact and affection from each other. As we passed one of the other cottages on our way to the school, I heard a shriek followed by a wailing, picked up and echoed by 2 or 3 other voices. There were bars on the windows. Winslow looked uncomfortable for the first time that morning. Special security cottage, he explained. Emotionally disturbed retardates. When there's a chance they'll harm themselves or others, we put them in Cottage K, locked up at all times. Emotionally disturbed patients here? Don't they belong in psychiatric hospitals? Oh, sure, he said, but it's a difficult thing to control. Some, the borderline emotionally disturbed, don't break down until after they've been here for a while. Others were committed by the courts, and we had no choice but to admit them, even though there's really no room for them. The real problem is that there's no room for anyone anywhere. Do you know how long our own waiting list is? 1,400. And we may have room for 25 or 30 of them by the end of the year. Where are those 1,400 now? Home, on the outside, waiting for an opening here or in some other institution. You see, our space problem is not like the usual hospital overcrowding. Our patients usually come here to stay for the rest of their lives. As we arrived at the new school building, a 1-story glass and concrete structure with large picture windows, I tried to imagine what it would be like walking through these corridors as a patient. I visualized myself in the middle of a line of men and boys waiting to enter a classroom. Perhaps I'd be one of those pushing another boy in a wheelchair, or guiding someone else by the hand, or cuddling a smaller boy in my arms. In one of the woodworking classrooms, where a group of older boys were making benches under a teacher's supervision, they clustered around us, eyeing me curiously. The teacher put down the saw and came toward us. "This is Mr. Gordon from Beekman University," said Winslow. "Wants to look over some of our patients. He's thinking of buying the place." The teacher laughed and waved at his pupils. "Well, if he buys it, he's got to take us with it. And he's got to get us some more wood to work with." As he showed me around the shop, I noticed how strangely quiet the boys were. They went on with their work of sanding or varnishing the newly finished benches, but they didn't talk. "Those are my silent boys, he said, as if he sensed my unspoken question. "Deaf mutes." "We have 106 of them here," explained Winslow. as a special study sponsored by the federal government. What an incredible thing! How much less they had than other human beings, mentally retarded, deaf, mute, and still eagerly sanding benches. One of the boys who had been tightening a block of wood in a vise stopped what he was doing, tapped Winslow on the arm, and pointed to the corner where a number of finished objects were drying on display shelves. The boy pointed to a lamp base on the second shelf and then to himself. It was a poor job, unsteady, the patches of wood filler showing through, and the varnish heavy and uneven. Winslow and the teacher praised it enthusiastically, and the boy smiled proudly and looked at me, waiting for my praise too. Yes, I nodded, mouthing the words exaggeratedly. Very good. Very nice. I said it because he needed it, but I felt hollow. The boy smiled at me, and when we turned to leave, he came over and touched my arm as a way of saying goodbye. It choked me up, and I had a great deal of difficulty controlling my emotions until we were out in the corridor again. The principal of the school was a short, plump, motherly lady who sat me down in front of a neatly lettered chart showing the various types of patients, the number of faculty assigned to each category, and the subjects they studied. Of course, she explained, we don't get many of the upper IQs anymore. They're taken care of, the 60 and 70 IQs, more and more in the city schools and special classes, or else there are community facilities for caring for them. Most of the ones we get are able to live out in foster homes, boarding houses, and do simple work on the farms or in a menial capacity or factories or laundries, or bakeries, I suggested. She frowned. Yes, I guess they might be able to do that. Now, we also classify our children. I call them all children, no matter what their ages are. They're all children here. We classified them as tidy or untidy. It makes the administration of their cottages a lot easier if they can be kept with their own levels. Some of the untidies are severely brain damaged cases, kept in cribs, and they will be cared for that way for the rest of their lives, or until science finds a way to help them. Oh, she smiled, explaining to me carefully, I'm afraid these are beyond help. No one is beyond help. She peered at me, uncertainly now. Yes, yes, of course, you're right. We must have hope. I made her nervous. I smiled to myself at the thought of how it would be if they brought me back here as one of her children. Would I be tidy or not? Back at Winslow's office, we had coffee as he talked about his work. It's a good place, he said. We have no psychiatrist on our staff, only an outside consulting man who comes in once every 2 weeks. But it's just as well. Every one of the psych staff is dedicated to his work. I could have hired a psychiatrist, but at the price I'd have to pay, I'm able to hire 2 psychologists, men who aren't afraid to give away a part of themselves to these people. What do you mean by a part of themselves? He studied me for a moment, and then, through the tiredness, flashed an anger. There are a lot of people who will give money or materials, but very few who will give time and affection. That's what I mean. His voice grew harsh, and he pointed to an empty baby bottle on the bookshelf across the room. You see that bottle? I told him I had wondered about it when we came into his office. Well, how many people do you know who are prepared to take a grown man into his arms and let him nurse with the bottle, and take the chance of having a patient urinate or defecate all over him? You look surprised. You can't understand it, can you? From way up there in your research ivory tower? What do you know about being shut out from every human experience as our patients have been? I couldn't restrain a smile, and he apparently misunderstood, because he stood up and ended the conversation abruptly. If I come back here to stay and he finds out the whole story, I'm sure he'll understand. He's the kind of man who would. As I drove out of Warren, I didn't know what to think. The feeling of cold grayness was everywhere around me, a sense of resignation. There had been no talk of rehabilitation, of cure, of someday sending these people out into the world again. No one had spoken of hope. The feeling was of living death, or worse, of never having been fully alive and knowing. Souls withered from the beginning and doomed to stare into the time and space of every day. I wondered about the house mother with her red blotched face, and the stuttering shop teacher, and the motherly principal, and youthful, tired-looking psychologist, and wished I knew how they had found their way here to work and dedicate themselves to these silent mines. Like the boy who had held the younger one in his arms, each had found a fulfillment in giving away a part of himself to those who had less. And what about the things I wasn't shown? I may soon be coming to Warren to spend the rest of my life with the others. Waiting. July 15th. I've been putting off a visit to my mother. I want to see her, and I don't. Not until I'm sure what is going to happen to me. Let's see first how the work goes and what I discover. Algernon refuses to run the maze anymore. General motivation has decreased. I stopped off again today to see him, and this time Strauss was there too. Both he and Niemer looked disturbed, and they watched Bert force feed him. Strange to see the little puff of white clamped down on the work table and Bert forcing the food down his throat with an eyedropper. If it keeps up this way, they'll have to start feeding him by injection. Watching Algernon squirm under those tiny bands this afternoon, I felt them around my own arms and legs. I started to gag and choke, and I had to get out of the lab for fresh air. I've got to stop identifying with him. I went down to Murray's bar and had a few drinks, and then I called Faye, and we made the rounds. Faye is annoyed that I've stopped taking her out dancing, and she got angry and walked out on me last night. She has no idea of my work and no interest in it, and when I do try to talk to her about it, she makes no attempt to hide her boredom. She just can't be bothered, and I can't blame her. She's interested in only 3 things that I can see: dancing, painting, and sex. And the only thing we really have in common is sex. It's foolish of me to try to interest her in my work. So she goes dancing without me. She told me that the other night she dreamed she had come into the apartment and set fire to all my books and notes, and that we went off dancing around the flames. I've got to watch out. She's becoming possessive. I just realized tonight that my own place is starting to resemble her apartment. A mess. I've got to cut down on the drinking. July 16th. Alice met Faye last night. I'd been concerned about what would happen if they came face to face. Alice came to see me after she found out about Algernon from Bert. She knows what it may mean, and she still feels responsible for having encouraged me in the first place. We had coffee and we talked late. I knew that Faye had gone out dancing at the Stardust Ballroom, so I didn't expect her home so early. But at about 1:45 in the morning, we were startled by Faye's sudden appearance on the fire escape. She tapped, pushed open the half-open window, and came waltzing into the room with a bottle in her hand. "Crashing the party," she said. "Brought my own refreshments." I had told her about Alice working on the project at the university, and I had mentioned Faye to Alice earlier, so they weren't surprised to meet. But after a few seconds of sizing each other up, they started talking about art and me, and for all they cared, I could have been anywhere else in the world. They liked each other. "I'll get the coffee," I said, and wandered out to the kitchen to leave them alone. When I came back, Faye had taken off her shoes and was sitting on the floor, sipping gin out of the bottle. She was explaining to Alice that as far as she was concerned, there was nothing more valuable to the human body than sunbathing, and that nudist colonies were the answer to the world's moral problems. Alice was half laughing hysterically at Faye's suggestion that we all join a nudist colony, and she leaned over and accepted a drink that Faye poured for her. We sat and talked until dawn, and I insisted on seeing Alice home. When she protested that it wasn't necessary, Faye insisted that she would be a fool to go out alone in the city at this hour. So I went down and hailed a cab. "There's something about her," said Alice on the way home. "I don't know what it is. Her frankness, her open trust, her unselfishness." I agreed. "And she loves you," said Alice. "No, she loves everyone," I insisted. "I'm just the neighbor across the hall." "Aren't you in love with her?" I shook my head. "You're the only woman I've ever loved." "Let's not talk about that." "Then you've cut me off from an important source of conversation." "Only one thing I'm worried about, Charlie, the drinking. I've heard about some of those hangovers." "Tell Bert to confine his observations and reports to the experimental data. I won't have him poisoning you against me. I can handle the drinks." "I've heard that one before." "But never from me." "That's the only thing I have against her," she said. "She's got you drinking and she's interfering with your work." "I can handle that too." "This work is important now, Charlie, not only to the world and millions of unknown people, but to you, Charlie. Charlie, you've got to solve this thing for yourself as well. Don't let anyone tie your hands. So now the truth comes out, I teased. You'd like me to see less of her. That's not what I meant. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. If she's interfering with my work, we both know I've got to cut her out of my life. No, I don't think you should cut her out of your life. She's good for you. You need a woman who's been around as she has. You would be good for me. She turned her face away. Not in the same way she is. She looked back at me. I came here tonight prepared to hate her. I wanted to see her as a vile, stupid whore you'd gotten mixed up with, and I had big plans about coming between you and saving you from her in spite of yourself. But now that I've met her, I realize I have no right to judge her behavior. I think she's good for you. So that really lets the air out of me. I like her even if I disapprove. But in spite of that, if you've got to drink with her and spend all your time with her in nightclubs and cabarets dancing, then she's in your way. And that's a problem only you can solve. Another one of those? I laughed. Are you up to this one? You're deeply involved with her, I can tell. Not all that deep. Have you told her about yourself? No. Imperceptibly, I could see her relax. By keeping the secret about myself, I had somehow not committed myself to Faye completely. We both knew that, wonderful as she was, Faye would never understand. I needed her, I said, and in a way she needed me, and living right across from each other, well, it was just handy, that's all. But I wouldn't call it love, not the same thing that exists between us. She looked down at her hands and frowned. I'm not sure I know what does exist between us. Something so deep and significant that Charlie inside me is terrified whenever there seems to be any chance of my making love to you. And not with her? I shrugged. That's how I know it's not important with her. It doesn't mean enough for Charlie to panic. Great, she laughed. And ironic as hell, when you talk about him that way, I hate him for coming between us. Do you think he'll ever let us? I don't know. I hope so. I left her at the door. We shook hands, and yet, strangely, it was much closer and more intimate than an embrace would have been. I went home and made love to Faye and kept thinking of Alice. July 27th. Working around the clock. Over Faye's protests, I've had a cot moved into the lab. She's become too possessive and resentful of my work. I think she could tolerate another woman, but not this complete absorption in something she can't follow. I was afraid it would come to this, but I have no patience with her now. I'm jealous of every moment away from the work, impatient with anyone who tries to steal my time. Though most of my writing time is spent on notes, which I keep in a separate folder, from time to time I have to put down my moods and thoughts out of sheer habit. The calculus of intelligence is a fascinating study. In a sense, this is the problem I've been concerned with all my life. Here is the place for the application of all the knowledge I have acquired. Time assumes another dimension now, work and absorption in the search for an answer. The world around me and my past seem far away and distorted, as if time and space were taffy being stretched and looped and twisted out of shape. The only real things are the cages and the mice in the lab experiment here on the 4th floor of the main building. There's no night or day. I've got to cram a lifetime of research into a few weeks. I know I should rest, but I can't until I know the truth about what is happening. Alice is a great help to me now. She brings me sandwiches and coffee, but she makes no demands about my perception. Everything is sharp and clear, each sensation heightened and illuminated so that reds and yellows and blues glow. Sleeping here has a strange effect. The odors of the laboratory animals, dogs, monkeys, mice, spin me back into memories, and it is difficult to know whether I'm experiencing a new sensation or recalling the past. It is impossible to tell what proportion is memory and what exists here and now, so that a strange compound is formed of memory and reality, past and present, response to stimuli stored in my brain centers, and response to stimuli in this room. It's as if all the things I've learned have fused into a crystal universe spinning before me so that I can see all the facets of it reflected in gorgeous bursts of light. A monkey sitting in the center of his cage, staring at me out of sleepy eyes, rubbing his cheeks with a little old man's shriveled hands. Chee, 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 and bouncing off the cage wire, up to the swing overhead where the other monkey sits staring dumbly into space, urinating, defecating, passing wind, staring at me and laughing. Chee, chee, chee! And bouncing around, leap, hop, up, around and down, he swings and tries to grab the other monkey's tail, but the one on the bar keeps swishing it away without fuss, out of his grasp. Nice monkey, pretty monkey, with big eyes and swishy tail. Can I feed him a peanut? No, the man will holler. That sign says do not feed the animals. That's chimpanzee. Can I pet him? No, I want to pet the chimpanzee. Never mind, come and look at the elephants. Outside, crowds of bright, sunshiny people are dressed in spring. Algernon lies in his own dirt, unmoving, and the odors are stronger than ever before. And what about me? July 28th. Faye has a new boyfriend. I went home last night to be with her. I went to my room first to get a bottle and then headed over on the fire escape. But fortunately, I looked before going in. They were together on the couch. Strange. I don't really care. It's almost a relief. I went back to the lab to work with Algernon. He has moments out of his lethargy. Periodically, he will run a shifting maze, but when he fails and finds himself in a dead end, he reacts violently. When I got down to the lab, I looked in. He was alert and came to see me as if he knew me. He was eager to work, and when I set him down through the trap door in the wire mesh of the maze, he moved swiftly along the pathways to the reward box. Twice he ran the maze successfully. The third time, he got halfway through, paused at an intersection, and then with a twitching movement took the wrong turn. I could see what was going to happen, and I wanted to reach down and take him out before he ended up in a blind alley, but I restrained myself and watched. When he found himself moving along the unfamiliar path, he slowed down and his actions became erratic. Start, pause, double back, turn around, and then forward again, until finally he was in the cul-de-sac that informed him, with a mild shock, that he had made a mistake. At this point, instead of turning back to find an alternate route, he began to move in circles, squeaking like a phonograph needle scratched across the grooves. He threw himself against the walls of the maze again and again, leaping up, twisting over backwards and falling, and throwing himself again. Twice he caught his claws in the overhead wire mesh, screeching wildly, letting go, and trying hopelessly again. Then he stopped and curled himself up into a small, tight ball. When I picked him up, he made no attempt to uncurl, but remained in that state, much like a catatonic stupor. When I moved his head or limbs, they stayed like wax. I put him back into his cage and watched him until the stupor wore off and he began to move around normally. What eludes me is the reason for his regression. Is it a special case, an isolated reaction, or is there some general principle of failure basic to the whole procedure? I've got to work out the rule. If I can find that out, and if it adds even one jot of information to whatever else has been discovered about mental retardation and the possibility of helping others like myself, I will be satisfied. Whatever happens to me, I will have lived 1,000 normal lives by what I might add to others not yet born. That's enough. July 31st. I'm on the edge of it. I sense it. They all think I'm killing myself at this pace, but what they don't understand is that I'm living at a peak of clarity and beauty I never knew existed. Every part of me is attuned to the work. I soak it up into my pores during the day, and at night, in the moments before I pass off into sleep, ideas explode into my head like fireworks. There is no greater joy than the burst of solution to a problem. Incredible that anything could happen to take away this bubbling energy, the zest that fills everything I do. It's as if all the knowledge I've soaked in during the past months has coalesced and lifted me to a peak of light and understanding. This is beautiful, love and truth all rolled into one. This is joy. And now that I've found it, how can I give it up? Life and work are the most wonderful things a man can have. I am in love with what I'm doing because the answer to this problem is right here in my mind, and soon, very soon, it will burst into consciousness. Let me solve this one problem. I pray God it is the answer I want. but if not, I will accept any answer at all and try to be grateful for what I had. Faye's new boyfriend is a dance instructor from the Stardust Ballroom. I can't really blame her since I have so little time to be with her. August 11th. Blind alley for the past 2 days. Nothing. I've taken a wrong turn somewhere because I get answers to a lot of questions, but not to the most important question of all. How does Algernon's regression affect the basic hypothesis of the experiment? Fortunately, I know enough about the processes of the mind not to let this block worry me too much. Instead of panicking and giving up, or what's even worse, pushing hard for answers that won't come, I've got to take my mind off the problem for a while and let it stew. I've gone as far as I can on a conscious level, and now it's up to those mysterious operations below the level of awareness. It's one of those inexplicable things how everything I've learned and experienced is brought to bear on the problem. Pushing too hard will only make things freeze up. How many great problems have gone unsolved because men didn't know enough or have enough faith in the creative process and in themselves to let go for the whole mind to work at it. So I decided yesterday afternoon to put the work aside for a while and go to Mrs. Niemer's cocktail party. It was in honor of the two men on the board of the Wellberg Foundation who had been instrumental in getting her husband the grant. I planned to take Faye, but she said she had a date and she'd rather go dancing. I started out the evening with every intention of being pleasant and making friends. But these days, I have trouble getting through to people. I don't know if it's me or them, but any attempt at conversation usually fades away in a minute or two, and the barriers go up. Is it because they are afraid of me? Or is it that deep down they don't care and feel the same about them? I took a drink and wandered around the big room. There were little knots of people sitting in conversation groups, the kind I find it impossible to join. Finally, Mrs. Niemer cornered me and introduced me to Hiram Harvey, one of the board members. Mrs. Niemer is an attractive woman, early 40s, blonde hair, lots of makeup, and long red nails. She had her arm through Harvey's. How's the research coming? She wanted to know. As well as can be expected. I'm trying to solve a tough problem right now. She lit a cigarette and smiled at me. I know that everyone on the project is grateful that you've decided to pitch in and help out. But I imagine you'd much rather be working on something of your own. It must be rather dull taking up someone else's work rather than something you've conceived and created yourself. She was sharp, all right. She didn't want Hiram Harvey to forget that her husband had the credit coming. I couldn't resist tossing it back at her. No one really starts anything new, Mrs. Niemer. Everyone builds on other men's failures. There is nothing really original in science. What each man contributes to the sum of knowledge is what counts. Of course, she said, talking to her elderly guest rather than to me. It's a shame Mr. Gordon wasn't around earlier to help solve these little final problems, she laughed. But then, oh, I forgot, you weren't in any position to do psychological experimentation. Harvey laughed, and I thought I'd better keep quiet. Bertha Niemer was not going to let me get the last word in, and if things went any further, it would really get nasty. I saw Dr. Strauss and Bert talking to the other man from the Wellberg Foundation, George Rayner. Strauss was saying, the problem, Mr. Rayner, is getting sufficient funds to work on projects like these without having strings tied to the money. When amounts are earmarked for specific purposes, we can't really operate. Rayner shook his head and waved a big cigar at the small group around him. The real problem is convincing the board that this kind of research has practical value. Strauss shook his head. The point I've been trying to make is that this money is intended for research. No one can ever know in advance if a project is going to result in something useful. Results are often negative. We learn what something is not, and that is as important as a positive discovery to the man who is going to pick up from there. At least he knows what not to do. As I approached the group, I noticed Rayner's wife, to whom I'd been introduced earlier. She was a beautiful, dark-haired woman of 30 or so. She was staring at me, or rather at the top of my head, as if she expected something to sprout. I stared back, and she got uncomfortable and turned back to Dr. Strauss. But what about the present project? Do you anticipate being able to use the techniques on other retardates? Is this something the world will be able to use? Strauss shrugged and nodded toward me. Still too early to tell. Your husband helped us put Charlie to work on the project, and a great deal depends on what he comes up with. Of course, Mr. Rayner put in. We all understand the necessity for pure research in fields like yours, but it would be such a boon to our image if we could produce a really workable method for achieving permanent results outside the laboratory, if we could show the world that there is some tangible good coming out of it. I started to speak, but Strauss, who must have sensed what I was going to say, stood up and put his arm on my shoulder. All of us at Beekman feel that the work Charlie is doing is of the utmost importance. His job now is to find the truth, wherever it leads. We leave it to your foundations to handle the public, to educate society. He smiled at the Rayners and steered me away from them. That, I said, is not at all what I was going to say. I didn't think you were, he whispered, holding onto my elbow, but I could see by the gleam in your eye you were going to cut them to pieces, and I couldn't allow that, could I? Guess not, I agreed, helping myself to another martini. Is it wise of you to drink so heavily? No, but I'm trying to relax, and I seem to have come to the wrong place. Well, take it easy, he said, and keep out of trouble tonight. These people are not fools. They know the way you feel about them, and even if you don't need them, we do. I waved a salute at him. I'll try, but you'd better keep Mrs. Rayner away from me. Shh, I'm going to goose her if she wiggles her fanny at me again. Shh, he hissed. She'll hear you. Shh, I echoed. Sorry. I'll just sit here in the corner and keep out of everyone's way. The haze was coming over me, but though I could see people staring at me, but through it, I could see people staring at me. I guess I was muttering to myself, too audibly. I don't remember what I said. A little while later, I had the feeling that people were leaving unusually early, but I didn't pay much attention until Neimer came up and stood in front of me. Just who the hell do you think you are that you can behave that way? I have never seen such insufferable rudeness in my life. I struggled to my feet. Now, what makes you say that? Strauss tried to restrain him, but he spluttered and gasped out, I say it because you have no gratitude or understanding of the situation. After all, you are indebted to these people, if not to us, in more ways than one. Since when is a guinea pig supposed to be grateful? I shouted. I've served your purposes, and now I'm trying to work out your mistakes. So how the hell does that make me indebted to anyone? Strauss started to move in to break it up, but Neimer stopped him. Just a minute. I want to hear this. I think it's time we had this out. He's had too much to drink, said his wife. Not that much, snorted Niebuhr. He's speaking pretty clearly. I've put up with a lot from him. He's endangered, if not actually destroyed, our work, and now I want to hear from his own mouth what he thinks his justification is. Oh, forget it, I said. You don't really want to hear the truth. But I do, Charlie, at least your version of it. I want to know if you feel any gratitude for all the things that have been done for you, the abilities you've developed, the things you've learned, the experiences you've had. Or do you think possibly you were better off before? In some ways, yes. That shocked them. I've learned a lot in the past few months, I said, not only about Charlie Gordon, but about life and people, and I've discovered that nobody really cares about Charlie Gordon, whether he's a moron or a genius. So what difference does it make? Oh, laughed Neimer. You're feeling sorry for yourself. What did you expect? This experiment was calculated to raise your intelligence, not to make you popular. We had no control over what happened to your personality, and you've developed from a likable, retarded young man into an arrogant, self-centered, antisocial bastard. The problem, dear professor, is that you wanted someone who could be made intelligent but still kept in a cage and displayed when necessary to reap the honors you seek. The hitch is that I'm a person. He was angry, and I could see he was torn between ending the fight and trying once more to beat me down. You're being unfair, as usual. You know we've always treated you well, done everything we could for you. Everything but treat me as a human being. You've boasted time and again that I was nothing before the experiment, and I know why, because if I was nothing, then you were responsible for creating me, and that makes you my lord and master. You resent the fact that I don't show my gratitude every hour of the day. Well, believe it or not, I am grateful, But what you did for me, wonderful as it is, doesn't give you the right to treat me like an experimental animal. I'm an individual now, and so is Charlie before he ever walked into that lab. You look shocked. Shocked. Yes, suddenly we discovered that I was always a person, even before, and that challenges your belief that someone with an IQ of less than 100 doesn't deserve consideration. Professor Niemer, I think when you look at me, your conscience bothers you. I've heard enough, he snapped. You're drunk. Ah, no, I assured him, because if I get drunk, you'll see a different Charlie Gordon from the one you've come to know. Yes, the other Charlie who walked in the darkness is still here with us, inside me. He's gone out of his head, said Mrs. Nemur. He's talking as if there were two Charlie Gordons. You better look after him, Doctor. Dr. Strauss shook his head. No, I know what he means. It's come up recently in therapy sessions. A particular dissociation has taken place in the past month or so. He's had several experiences of perceiving himself as if as he was before the experiment, as a separate and distinct individual still functioning in his consciousness, as if the old Charlie were struggling for control of the body. No, I never said that. Not struggling for control. Charlie is there, all right, but not struggling with me, just waiting. He has never tried to take over or tried to pervert me from doing anything I wanted to do. Then, remembering about Alice, I modified it. Well, almost never. The humble, self-effacing Charlie you were all talking about a while ago is just waiting patiently. I'll admit I'm like him in a number of ways, but humility and self-effacement are not among them. I've learned how little they get a person in this world. You've become cynical, said Niemer. That's all this opportunity has meant to you. Your genius has destroyed your faith in the world and in your fellow men. That's not completely true, I said softly. But I've learned that intelligence alone doesn't mean a damn thing. Here in your university, intelligence, education, knowledge have all become great idols. But I know now there's one thing you've all overlooked. Intelligence and education that hasn't been tampered by human affection isn't worth a damn. I helped myself to another martini from the nearby sideboard and continued my sermon. Don't misunderstand me, I said. Intelligence is one of the greatest human gifts. But all too often, a search for knowledge drives out the search for love. This is something else I've discovered for myself very recently. I present it to you as a hypothesis. Intelligence without the ability to give and receive affection leads to mental and moral breakdown, to neurosis, and possibly even psychosis. And I say that the mind absorbed in and involved in itself as a self-centered end to the exclusion of human relationships can only lead to violence and pain. When I was retarded, I had lots of friends. Now I have no one. Oh, I know lots of people, lots and lots of people, but I don't have any real friends, not like I used to have in the bakery. Not a friend in the world who means anything to me, and no one I mean anything to. I discovered that my speech was becoming slurred, and there was a lightness to my head. That can't be right, can it? I insisted. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's right? Strauss came over and took my arm. Charlie, maybe you better lie down a while. You've had too much to drink. Why y'all looking at me like that? What did I say wrong? Did I say something wrong? I didn't mean to say anything that wasn't right. I heard the words thick in my mouth as if my face had been shot full of Novocaine. I was drunk, completely out of control. At that moment, almost with the flick of a switch, I was watching the scene from the dining room doorway, and I could see myself as the other Charlie there, near the sideboard, drink in hand, eyes wide and frightened. I always try to do the right things. My mother always taught me to be nice to people because she said that way you won't get into trouble and you'll always have lots of friends. I could see by the way he was twitching and writhing that he had to get to the bathroom. Oh my God, not there in front of them. Excuse me, please, he said. I got to go. Somehow, in that drunken stupor, I managed to turn him away from them and head him toward the bathroom. He made it in time, and after a few seconds, I was in control again. I rested my cheek against the wall and then washed my face with cool water. Still groggy, but I knew I was going to be all right. That's when I saw Charlie watching me from the mirror behind the wash basin. I don't know how I knew it was Charlie and not me. Something about the dull, questioning look in his face, his eyes wide and frightened, as if one word from me could he would turn and run deep into the dimension of the mirrored world. But he didn't run. He just stared back at me, open mouthed, jaw hanging loose. Hello, I said. So you finally come to face with me. He frowned just a bit, as if he didn't know what I meant, as if he wanted an explanation but didn't know how to ask for it. Then, giving up, he smiled wryly from the corner of his mouth. Stay there right in front of me, I shouted. I'm sick and tired of your spying on me from doorways and dark places where can't catch up with you. He stared. Who are you, Charlie? Nothing but the smile. I nodded, and he nodded back. Then what do you want? I asked. He shrugged. Oh, come on now, I said. You must want something. You've been following me. He looked down, and I looked at my hands to see what he was looking at. You want these back, don't you? You want me out of here so you can come back and take over where you left off. I don't blame you. It's your body and your brain and your life, even though you weren't able to make much use of it. I don't have the right to take it away from you. Nobody does. Who's to say that my light is better than your darkness? Who's to say death is better than your darkness? Who am I to say? But I'll tell you something else, Charlie. I stood up and backed away from the mirror. I'm not your friend. I'm your enemy. I'm not going to give up my intelligence without a struggle. I can't go back down into that cave. There's no place for me to go now, Charlie. So you've got to stay away. Stay inside my unconscious where you belong and stop following me around. I'm not going to give up, no matter what they all think, no matter how lonely it is. I'm going to keep what they've given me and do great things for the world and for other people like you. As I turned toward the door, I had the impression he was reaching out his hand toward me, but the whole damn thing was foolish. I was just drunk, and that was my own reflection in the mirror. When I came out, Strauss wanted to put me into a taxi, but I insisted I could get home all right. All I needed was a little fresh air, and I didn't want anyone to come with me. I wanted to walk by myself. I was seeing myself as I really had become. Niemeyer had said it. I was an arrogant, self-centered bastard. Unlike Charlie, I was incapable of making friends or thinking about other people and their problems. I was interested in myself and myself only. For one long moment in that mirror, I had seen myself through Charlie's eyes, looked down at myself, and saw what I had really become, and I was ashamed. Hours later, I found myself in front of the apartment house and made my way upstairs and through the dimly lit hallway. Passing Faye's door, I could see there was a light on, and I started toward her door. But just as I was about to knock, I heard her giggling and a man's answering laugh. It was too late for that. I let myself into the apartment quietly and stood there for a while in the dark, not daring to move, not daring to turn on the light. Just stood there and felt the whirlpool in my eyes. What has happened to me? Why am I so alone in the world? 4:30 a.m. The solution came to me just as I was dozing off. Illuminated. Everything fits together, and I see what I should have known from the beginning. No more sleep. I've got to get back to the lab and test this against the results from the computer. This, finally, is the flaw in the experiment. I've found it. Now what becomes of me?